Good.
Beautiful, beautiful day, and I will open with prayer. Gary will do an introduction.
Great.
Craig's going to, you're Craig, so Craig's going to do the introduction. Okay, sorry. Your Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather this morning and hear some words from Don as he reflects on his ministry here. We thank you for allowing him to be our minister for many years. Ask that you be with us today, especially be with all those that are in need of your healing touch and grace. Be with the people of the Ukraine and the leaders of the world as they figure out how to deal with the Ukraine problems. Ask that you be with us all as many of us will journey for the luncheon this afternoon. Keep us safe on the roads and bless this day. Amen. Amen.
There have been a lot of changes at Westminster since Don Lincoln became head pastor almost 22 years ago. Church membership has grown. Spiritual growth opportunities have expanded for virtually anyone who wants to get involved. We have the best choir and music program in the region. The pastors and staff have brought us through more than 2 years of a global pandemic, and we've instituted technology that has given us the flexibility that few other churches have. It has all happened under Don Lincoln's watch. From our standpoint, Tuesday morning fellowship has changed too, but we're still here, still standing. And every time we've asked Pastor Lincoln and the other pastors to speak to us, they've graciously agreed. Don has given us updates on Westminster's progress, shared with us his passion for fly fishing, advised us on how to craft our own memorials before it's too late. Recalled some of the highlights of his tenure. Today, for his final meeting with us, he thought it best to keep it open-ended, maybe ranging over what he's learned in his 42 years in ministry, make a few suggestions on how to welcome a new head pastor, and bravely, he has vowed to listen to anything you have to say to him as he prepares to leave. Don, it's all yours.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, it's great. Great.
Is that not on?
No. Yeah, if we're gonna use that, let's make sure we're working. I'm gonna take the coat off. Roll up my sleeves, put the gloves on.
Well, we're supposed to be doing that with you. You're not supposed to be doing that with us.
There we go. Good. That's probably better. There's yeah, it makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, well, that way the folks at home can see you.
Right. Good. But I can't see them. Where's the?
Oh, they won't be on that screen.
Okay.
It's just as though
Turn around. Okay.
you can see them behind you.
I can and Bev. Hey, Bob. All the way.
Bob, Bev, and Ken.
Good, good. Okay, so first thing, yeah, if I take all of the time up, you won't be able to ask me any questions. And I thought maybe I should try that, but I'll try not to talk too long, as they say, what is it? What's it mean when the pastor looks at their watch? Absolutely nothing. Right? But I'll try to talk about some of the things I've learned. I've forgotten most of the stuff I think I've learned, but there are a few tidbits. The first one, and this goes for, I mean, most pastors get this. Don't ever follow a pastor who served somewhere 32 years. Because you're going to be an unintentional interim unless they move the congregation to an entirely new building. 300 people joined the congregation during the 2-year interim. 300. I mean, people never join when there's an interim pastor. And the congregation is growing so fast that a few years in, there's actually some people around when they saw Bob Young graciously leading in our 9/11 remembrance service 1 year after. Somebody said, well, who was that other guy up there with you? I mean, what a blessing to follow a congregation with 100-year history that also was just exploding in new life and energy, and you know, following somebody who exemplified the very best way of remaining in the community, and being supportive and an encouragement. I had lunch monthly at Bob and Louise's home when they graciously invited, you know, pastors of larger churches in the Westchester community to just be in conversation with one another. And I learned, you know, from those colleagues. Bob was great in, you know, having lunch with me, you know, frequently early on. And I, you know, I need to say just publicly, Bob, that it was, I could not have imagined following somebody who did it better. There's a lot of pastors who get in the way. And I had a friend who, the former head of staff, sat in the back row his first Sunday and then immediately went to the rear door, and everybody went and greeted the former pastor. And the new pastor was like, what do you, and I, you know, so I've learned, and hopefully I think I'm going to move to like Italy, just so I'm really out of the way. But I think that's one of the things I learned, that it can be done well. The rest, this is just a whole collection of things, and there's no order. Hospital calls are some of the best things.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Slide this over.
Sorry.
Then you won't cover it.
Gotcha. There you go. Sorry about that. Yeah, we're still learning technology. Hospital calls are some of the best things in ministry. You meet people you might not otherwise ever meet, or actually have conversations with people that you might not really ever have conversations with, because not everybody, you know, feels the need to talk with you. You know, standing at the door, you know, after worship, that, you know, there's limited time. That is a thing that should go in the welcome new pastors. Don't stand at the door for 10 minutes after worship talking to the new pastor, because if all 700 people in the room do that, it'll be Tuesday morning before they're free. But you know, the conversations that you end up having in the hospital, and I have colleagues who don't do any hospital calling. That's for the associates. And some colleagues are, you know, like I don't have time for that. I spend 800 hours a week in the study reflecting on, I need to be out in the world, be with people. But I found the conversations I ended up having with people were such a blessing. Some of them were difficult. Some of them were funny. Some of them, if I remembered them or kept notes, were helpful to me down the road for weddings or baptisms or funerals. Opportunities to learn about people's lives, and that was when I got here. And I don't know who established this, Bob, but we visited every day at Chester County Hospital, and
turn right.
We did.
Then turn right on West Road.
So you're turn left, turn right. He's still got its navigation on. That happens to me usually when I'm on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and I take my phone off the thing and I forget my Waze is on, and I go in to the facilities, and I'm standing in the facilities, and there's guys next to me, and all of a sudden my pocket goes, turn right, and the guy goes, no you don't. Sorry. Anyway, when I got here, and we continued all the way until COVID, we had access at Chester County Hospital to the census, the roster of who was in the hospital. They stopped that at COVID, and we're hoping that we'll be able to get back to it. It's the religious census. Doesn't say anything about why anybody's in there or whatever else. But one of us would go every single day. Monday was my day. So if you were in the hospital Monday between usually probably 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, I would see you unless you were down for tests or, colonoscopy or, and Pastor Ann would do 2 days a week as associate for pastoral care. And those were, I honestly, people, and there were people who hadn't been in church for a while and, were, maybe not always excited to see the pastor. But it, anyway, that said, the hospital visits are a unique thing. And in seminary, when they started with this, developed this kind of thing called clinical pastoral education, where you're supposed to learn how you're supposed to talk to people and not just tell stories about yourself and things that, find out how they are and what's going on and wait for them to offer things. And then you were supposed to write up these verbatims of these 45-minute deep theological life purpose conversations with everybody you saw in the hospital. And I learned early on that while that was a really interesting approach, hospital visits, unless somebody says, Don, well, come on, grab a chair, sit down, let's have a conversation, you probably don't need to stay there a long time. One gal said to me, Don, I was so glad you left when you did, because 10 seconds later, I threw up all over myself. And one guy, unembarrassed enough to say, Don, I'm on the bedpan right now, so if you don't mind, don't sit down on the bed. Somebody's just had abdominal surgery, and any movement makes you learn things over the years. And if there's an invitation to a conversation, you pick up on it and you run with it. If there's not, don't be insistent that, anybody ever been in the hospital? A few of us, yes. And I remember, being happy to see my pastor and also happy when my pastor left. I'm going to take up all my time here. Some of you may remember there was a Sunday morning, and Gary Artisoni was preaching, and I had this incredibly severe pain up right in here, and went to urgent care, and they did an EKG and for some reason the was it a T wave was elevated, or so, and the next thing I know, they're in there, like, putting an IV in, they're giving me 3 aspirins, and, they call Linda in, and there's an ambulance. And we drove by Westminster worship was going on, the siren's going, I'm thinking they're listening to this thing. I'm in the hospital, nothing was wrong. Well, I had serious issues in my esophagus, which is where I was getting this bad pain. But like 5 of my colleagues showed up in the ER. I said, guys, Linda was like, guys, talk to the nurse. Anyway, let's see, other things I learned. You can, as a pastor, you could probably tell if you walk in our office, you can never have too many books. And pastors are just kind of that way. It's just, I don't know, maybe because it looks impressive. I have books that sit on my shelf that, I still have from seminary, haven't opened them since. But anyway, you can never have too many books until you're going to retire. And like, who wants these 60-year-old theology books? Anyway, but I actually gave 8 boxes of books to a guy who's in a small Assemblies of God congregation. He's an elder, and the pastors asked him to do some preaching the other day, and I said, Don, you don't happen to have any books? I thought, well, do I have books? Yeah, and then, trying to do that. I have learned over the years that stories are the best thing. And I don't think when I first started preaching, I had, you wanted to be erudite and theologically robust. And I also had a seminary professor who said, don't tell stories about yourself. Don't let the sermon be about yourself. And I get, if it's all about how great I am and how amazing my faith is and how wonderfully God has worked through me to do miracles in your midst. I mean, you can say that about your predecessor, but I mean, I get the seminary professor saying this is not, and preaching professor said you should never have yourself in sermons. I come to disagree with that particularly if it's about my humanity, maybe even my depravity, that people resonate with stories. And most of you know that more often than not, could be like the first 25% of a sermon is an illustration. Sometimes it's 50% if it's been a busy week and I'm not sure if I have much to say. And it was somewhere along the line that I realized, well, that's what we have mostly from Jesus. I typically don't preach often from Jesus' lengthy discourse in John 14, 15, 16, 17. I don't even know how long it goes, but it's like really thick stuff, instructions to the disciples. And most of what we do is we keep retelling his stories. And the scriptures that we remember from childhood on into adulthood are the stories of scripture. And that's been a gift to me. And I know people, may not remember anything else I say, but they do remember some of the stories. And if I ever repeat one, there's always somebody who says, oh, I remember when you used that before. I have learned that your children, as a pastor, your children and your spouse can be a great source of sermon illustrations until they tell you to stop it. Dad, I don't want to hear any more stories about me. And I remember Andrew specifically telling me that at one point, and I always tell colleagues, get those done while they're, 5 years and under, when they're not in there listening to you, because it's gonna be tough. How long? All morning, right? This is a sort of a catch-all. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. I mean, that could have to do with budget. New staff and how well they're going to fit in and how engaged everybody's going to be and how much they're going to get with the program or not. Plans for a building, engagement with a township, how much a little drawing of something is going to cost. I mean, it's just, you learn a lot of things. Just don't have expectations that things are all going to, and the positive way to say is, trust the Spirit to work in ways that you cannot begin to dream or imagine. And I've watched over the years that thankfully, all of my ideas and thoughts and choices and decisions were not honored by God. Thanks be to God. And I always say, I dread to think of some of the places I would have gone, some of the places I would have moved, some of the people I would have married if I'd had my way about everything. But there is some sense of don't in ministry. I've learned, Don, take day at a time, plan ahead, but don't be afraid to be surprised and expect that some of that may be exactly what God is doing. And it's still happening. Who would have ever imagined a pandemic? And yet this congregation has thrived. We have members joining from across the state. We have people worshiping from Curacao. Really? I mean, it's just, it's just amazing to me. Here was a tough lesson. Never leave a significant pledge to a capital campaign verbal. So he said, Don, I'll be back in Westchester in 3 weeks. I'd like to do this to the campaign. And I should have said, could you just scribble that on a napkin for me? Because we never know what our days are going to be like. And if you're ever asked to do, go out and talk to somebody about it, one of the great joys of this congregation is that its financial foundation is widely spread across the congregation. And I don't know how that came to be. That I think came to be long before I was. I mean, we've had a couple significant givers, but I have colleagues who are doing $40 and $50 million campaigns right now, and they'll have $40 million of a $45 million campaign subscribed by 100 households. 40 million, and they're going to people with foundations. That's not Westminster. Huge family foundations and massive amounts of money, and there are times when, as you well know, that any college president, organizational executive, whatever, is thrilled to know of those really, really, really deep pockets. And there are a lot of really wonderful philanthropic folks. But one of the things I've loved about being at Westminster is, 50% of our budget isn't covered by 6 households. One of the challenges is when one of those households leaves, it takes like 100 new households to make up a pledge like that. But I did have one very significant pledge, and should have said, could you just scribble that on a napkin? Because it would have been done. And the person did not come back here in a right mind. Was medically incapacitated. And the story goes way beyond that, but it was one. So if you are ever, have a chance to do that, I save all my sent emails. It's been an amazing. I think I have like 40-some thousand sent. I mean, I'm saying all of them. Like I respond to people, THNX, that's my short version of thanks. I delete all those. But I'm amazed at, number one, where I've saved myself. No, actually, I do remember, I did let you know that you were supposed to be doing X, Y, Z. Or no, we did have a conversation about that. But the gift that has been for, particularly for funerals, or somebody who returns, or who was lost from the fold, or who got angry, or whatever. It has been such a blessing to be able to recall my memories. I'm retiring. I realize, I'm not as sharp as I once was, and amazing the things that I've had conversation with folks, and I go, oh yes, that's the woman who said she had experienced this and would love to talk about it with somebody if, it's been a huge, the old school pastors used to like a card file thing, every member, and that's it. I mean, they just talk about that in the corporate world too. You just have your Rolodex. Boy, you'd have Chuck's name there, and you'd know everything about it, good, bad, and everything else. That would, just because when Chuck called, you knew what. And those sent emails have been great. I learned this very early on. I don't blame others. It's not good for the team. It's not good for yourself, particularly if you actually are the one to blame, to try to pass. Oh, the secretary, it was probably the secretary that missed it, and then it got back and the secretary came in and said, Don, I had nothing to, I mean, it was just very early on. Apologize up front, apologize, apologize, apologize. Even if it's mostly not your fault, apologize. Apologize for the team. Take it as a team. Don't throw your colleagues under the bus. Affirm colleagues in every way you can, unless you really are so anxious to get rid of them, and then you just, you keep your mouth shut. But being upfront in those kind of ways, it's things go a lot quicker. And while it may be more painful in the moment, to say, like, yeah, I really messed up on that. It pays off in the long run in spades, and people will be forgiving if they believe you're transparent and have some integrity and are honest about what's going on. And I learned how to, and these are some of the things one of the things I'm hoping to do. I think, Bob, you did some new pastor preaching kinds of gatherings, didn't you? Didn't you gather newer, younger pastors to learn more about talk about preaching at your house lunches? I think you did some of that. A little. And I know you wrote a book, and I know you were adjunct at the seminary, but one of the things I'm hoping to do is maybe do some mentoring of young pastors. And this goes against the grain of what I have colleagues who would say, absolutely don't do this, but I learn how to fix a jam in the copier. I have colleagues who say, never, ever learn how to run the copier. When a Sunday school teacher comes in at 8:30 and is it's a volunteer and you're the only one in the office, and they say, I need this for the kids to color, and it's something, not my job, like, really? I mean, at least give it the college try. It was, because and you never know, it's because it'll be Friday at 3:30 and there's nobody here, or Saturday at 9 in the morning, and you want to print up your funeral or your wedding, and the copier jams, or somebody left it jammed. That's the one I hate. But there are folks who, still have not learned how to, fix a jam. Learn how to fix a jam in the copier, because you just never know when you are going to need a piece of paper. I'm hoping in retirement there aren't as many of those times, that I'm not. The other thing is, and I tried it, not everybody's done it, but it's learn how to run the soundboard. At least how to turn it on and open up a microphone. You don't have to learn how to. I mean, it's digital now, and it's like an airplane cockpit. But it's just again, you never know when you're going to need to, and if somebody goes down, 10 minutes before a wedding, who's going to run the soundboard? It's good to be heard. In 42 years of ministry, I realized that weekends are for retirement, or retirement is for weekends. Somebody said to me, Don, really, you're still going strong, and we love you. And I said 42 years of well, actually 45 years if you count all the seminary years when I worked in a church. 45 years of no weekends. And if you have a spouse who works outside the house, Linda didn't work outside the house a whole lot in our time here, but a number of years did, and if they're a 9 to 5-er, Monday through Friday, and if you happen to do any sermon work on Saturday, which I learned at some point to try to do a lot of my writing on Thursday, but I still end up working on early Saturday morning. It really means you don't get much downtime, and you don't get 3-day weekends. And not a complaint. I entered ministry absolutely fully aware of that. And one of the joys of having multiple staff is, we can have somebody on call and we can take a break. And this congregation has been very robust and gracious in vacations and things like that. But you have to manage yourself and your time in certain ways. And one of the things is, you may recognize this Maggie Smith line from Downton Abbey. Linda's looking forward to the time of being able to say, "What's a weekend?" What's a weekend? In Maggie Smith's case in Downton Abbey, it's because she's of such royalty that every day is the same. It's all a gift, and she's, served food, and the bed is turned down, and she's dressed, and everything's taken care of. And it doesn't make a difference whether it's Tuesday or Sunday. But it's the nature of ministry. One of the changes, though, has been when I entered ministry, and even when I got here, nobody did funerals on anything other than weekdays. Everybody did funerals Monday through Friday. That was the way it went. And prior to the sort of significant rush on cremations, people felt more compelled to move things along. But I talked to a funeral director just the other day, and he said it's been 23 Saturdays in a row. And people say, well, it works for everybody. And I try to tell folks, I say, your family are going to show up, whether it's a Tuesday or a Saturday. I mean, your kids or your siblings or what, they'll come. In fact, most of us, if we're still working, are glad to tell the boss, oh, my closest childhood friend's funeral is today. And they say, oh, yes, please go. But that's been an interesting change. It's almost always, the grandkids or the whatever else. And it's, this is, families will gather for those kinds of things. Talking about retirement, so I retire before they want you to. Not everybody determines that well enough. I hope I have. I think I'm in good shape. I've seen no buckets of tar or baskets full of feathers. But it's one of those. And I've had friends, I've had colleagues who stayed a year too long, who were so ready and so empty and didn't make the wisest choices and ended up with a sour taste in your last year of ministry. And there is nothing sour in my life as a pastor at Westminster. I mean, I cannot imagine going out on a more positive, happy, joyful note. And that's the blessing of this congregation for me, and what I will tell my successor. I was nervous with COVID because I just never imagined we'd get a vaccine in whatever it was, 6 or 7 months. You just assume it's going to be 2 years. And I really didn't want to leave an empty building. I mean, that would have been hard. Making the announcement, April 18th, I think it was. And I remember that because I had shoulder surgery on the 7th, and I was trying to figure out when to do it. And I went for the sympathy vote. I had my arm in a sling and, pain on my face to let you know I needed to retire, and all the poor guy looked at it. So, but that was to an empty room, and that was hard, but I had some sense of confidence then. Delta and Omicron obviously pushed on that a little bit, but that we'd have people back in the building, and the timing would be right. And this is the summer I planned on, Lynn and I planned on for about 5 years. We started the conversation about this summer with the personnel committee in 2018. And I said, this is kind of my target, between 67 and 68. And we're right on the money. And the congregation's been great about that. Let's see, other things. Here's something that's been interesting. Volunteering has changed since I started ministry and since I grew up. And some of what I've experienced is that, really good and gifted and bright and capable people in terms of particular leadership or whatever else, I don't think volunteer as much because they're already busy. they're grateful to be asked and appreciate being asked and invited, and a personal invitation to somebody to some kind of role, you know, leadership role, or would you be willing to serve on this committee? But used to be, and you put in the bulletin, you know, we love volunteers for the pastor nominating committee, or, you know, and then you'd be like, ooh, we've had a few volunteers that are a little scary. Now it's nobody in here. Okay. But we all know there's sometimes people who put themselves forward for something, and it's not because they're particularly talented or gifted for that area, or because they're exactly what the group needs, but because they're needful of something, you know, whether it's community or belonging, or, you know, or they want to be the wrench in the works. You know, I mean, I'm being a little transparent here, but so I encourage you to, I mean, you know, a circle of folks who are gifted and thoughtful, and if there's a niche where you think somebody would fit, talk to them about it. And Craig, you already mentioned one of the things, everybody do a funeral plan. You mentioned, I've talked to this group about it. You cannot imagine what a gift it is to have a folder in the office with some suggested scriptures and hymns, and obviously, and I say this again and again, you know, like draft your own obituary, because if you don't, somebody else will write it, and you know, it may not be what you want to talk about. I'm amazed when I get with families and they just don't have a clue, or they argue. Dad's favorite hymn was, he hated that hymn. I go, no, you know, it's like, you know, right there, here's my 5 favorite hymns. Here are the 6 hymns you dare not sing, or I will come haunt you from the grave. It's, what would it take? So if you're at a funeral and you see something, my problem with my dad was he had like, I don't know, like 80 scriptures that were his favorites in a folder full of funeral bulletins. But it's just, anyway, okay. Quickly, suggestions on how to welcome a new pastor. And then I'll open it up. Wear your name tags. You guys wear them in here. Sunday mornings, wear your name tags. Tell them, and you can't always see them. Put them. It took me a long time to learn, you know, to put my name tag, not here, but here.
Yeah.
On the because you go to shake hands and you're leaning, you're looking that way. I'm making sure I see your hand and looking here as opposed to over here. It's just huge. And so, you know, they're down here, and that, you know, that's, sorry, you know, not looking. And keep telling the pastor your name. Bob Du Bois, Bob and Wendy, I remember when they joined him, Bob came out to the door. He always came to the center door. I don't remember where they sat initially. Wendy always, I would know, you know, and I do see where you sit, most of you. But Bob, every time he came out the door, from the first Sunday they came, Bob Du Bois said, Bob and Wendy Du Bois, you know, every single Sunday. And he said, like the second Sunday when he said, Don, I'm going to keep saying it until you remember it. And this is not a test. I'm not going to say, so do you know me? I'm going to keep saying it because I would love for you to know who I am, and you'll learn that eventually. And if it takes a year, it's fine. This is a big congregation, and I get it. Well, I learned Bob, and it's actually spelled Dubois, but he says Du Bois, and so it's one of those things where I want you to know how to say it. So when you do my funeral, it's not Bob Dubois, Robert Dubois. No, it's Bob Du Bois. So I be proud of your name and who you are and your role, and recognize there's a whole lot of people in this congregation. And eventually I did remember Bob Du Bois. I mean, it was a huge gift to me. This is kind of an interesting one, and this is really probably for a different generation, but do not assume that you'll have the same relationship with the new pastor that you had with the old pastor, good, bad, or ugly. you know, some people you have a unique relationship with because 4 weeks into your pastorate, you have an incident in the parking lot and you take out their vehicle. Most of you have heard that story. The accelerator stuck on Linda's BMW and beautiful, just out of the shop, black, whatever, Buick, I think. Yeah. So I've always had a certain kinship with a couple in here, kind of just a smile that, you know, we have history. It was interesting. Someone thought because their parents had just a wonderful, amazing relationship with my predecessor, and you know, beautiful, that they would, you know, be able to replicate that same kind of relationship with the successor. Perfect friends for the. There were a couple folks who just figured, well, my mom was great friends with the former pastor's wife, so I'm going to be great friends with the new pastor's wife. And some people just make those assumptions. And you and I know that chemistry isn't always the same from generation to generation. So, you know, recognize that, and some of you may, you know, have had limited connection with me, and they may have a robust connection with a new pastor. It just varies. Please let them know, particularly if you're in the hospital, if you want to be seen. You know, get somebody to call. Just let the church know. It's not a demand. We love stopping by and saying, "Can I say a quick prayer with you?" You know, give them good rest. Let the doctors be amazing. Let the nurses be, you know, just comforting and generous and good to see you. I mean, you know, that it's cute. Send an email about a sermon. There's a guy in this congregation who has emailed every single one of the pastors, and it's not every week. I mean, that would be like, you know, I don't need that. But it could be every, you know, 8th or 10th or 15th sermon. I'll get an email from this guy, and he's emailed every one of my colleagues, and he'll say, Don, really, really touched me Sunday. Thanks. Simple one-liner. You know, that you challenged me on Sunday. Insightful message. You know, never thought of that text that way. And that could be a nice way of saying it, and I hope you never think about it that way again. But it's, you know, be generous to a new pastor, because it's, you know, we all know we're not, as I preached not long ago, and Bob and I had a lovely email conversation. Well, the woman who came out, and go, well, you certainly are no Dr. Young, and at the door, and Bob emailed and said, well, yeah, you know, won't be too long before somebody will probably say to the new one, well, you certainly are no Don Lincoln. I go, well, yeah, you're, you know, and we know we're not going to please everybody. None of us are, but a word of encouragement, a simple word. You know, I mean, then you can tell when somebody comes and says, good message, good message. I mean, that's like, because we do get complaints and about, you know, the craziest things. I didn't like that last hymn. You know, so, well, we weren't singing it to you anyway. So I, but it's, you know, I think, okay, I got some laughter back there. Anyway, words of encouragement. You know, if you want to do something for a new pastor, you know, get him a gift certificate to your favorite restaurant in the area, or tickets to the Brandywine Museum or Longwood Gardens, or if you know, if you have symphony tickets and you can't go to one, offer it to the new pastor and his or her spouse. No strings attached. Just, you know, we love this restaurant. We know, you know, hope you'll have a chance, you know, to be on your own. Do not invite a pastor and a spouse to dinner within the first 6 months. I mean, think about it. You know, there's, you know, probably 800 active households, or 1,000 all told, but in terms of active who would be able or willing to do this. once a month dinner invitations, they'd have to be here. I'd have to do the math quick, 40 years. I don't have, I'm not saying don't invite and don't engage, but and do not invite them to come to your hot tub in the first 6 months or the first 6 years or ever. We had someone who was absolutely insistent. We had to come to dinner and say, oh, we're not good that week, and finally, planned it out a year from them, and a week before said, and bring your suits because we're going in the hot tub. And we said, no, we're not. Did I mention funeral planning? Okay, do that now. Yeah, be an encourager. Don't complain. Don't participate in parking lot conversations or comparisons. And if you're hauled into one, because we're human beings and they all happen, be positive, be thoughtful. Remember, you were young once and needed encouragement and mentoring and needed to be blessed by people who were more seasoned and given room to learn and grow and understand the system and get a feel for things. I'm assuming that your new pastor will be younger than me. In fact, I'm under the assumption that it's likely I will continue to remain the oldest starting head of staff at 45. I'm the only new head of staff that this congregation had who was in his 40s. Everybody else in their 30s. We had an interim, Graham Hardy, who was older than I am now. Much older. Grandma, I think, was 78 when he started. But and your new pastor is going to be gifted, or the committee wouldn't be in a conversation with him or her. But they're going to be younger than some of y'all's children. Tony Sunder was an incredibly gifted young pastor who made a few mistakes and learned and was encouraged and blessed and challenged and occasionally criticized, but loved by this congregation into becoming, just a superbly effective pastor. Now in his second head of staff position, and Tony's right now only 2 years older than I was when I started at Westminster, head of staff at First Atlanta after 5 years at First Allentown, both congregations the same size. So I just encourage you to be a blessing. And if you hear conversations going, comparisons going on, say, isn't it great that we don't get 25 more years of Don? Don was good for Don's season, and Bob was great for Bob's season, and Robbie's dad was great for his season. What did your dad go by? Did he go by Robert? Bob? And you guys, as the, if you will, the more chronologically advantaged senior statespersons of the congregation who have seen a little bit of life, you can help others. And like, hey, this congregation has absorbed and welcomed and trained heads of staff for 130 years. And obviously has done it well enough that we only had 4 of them in the last century. Most churches, cannot talk about that kind of record. And we're looking forward to another, hopefully, quarter a century or thereabouts. Don't make judgments until we got some time under our belt. You know, it's a shakedown cruise. And they're going to learn us and we're going to learn them. And anyway, that's enough. Questions for me? Yeah, Dave.
What career would you have pursued if it hadn't been as a pastor?
I started out college in microbiology and wanted to be a thoracic surgeon. That was I was going to med school. So I probably, the other thing, I tested out physician or forest ranger. Tree surgeon, I don't, you know, but that was, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Yeah, and God had other plans. And no regrets, no regrets. Yeah, Gene.
Memory fails me. Could you go from the beginning to the end quickly? You.
Beginning to end of what? My life?
Birth,
Born in Cincinnati, raised there, older sister, younger sister. My father worked for Procter & Gamble, Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, major in microbiology to start, ended up with a degree in music, Princeton Theological Seminary in Jersey. First church was Charlotte, North Carolina, associate pastor in a large church, teeny little country church for 10 months, and that's way too long a story. Associate pastor in another large church in Roanoke, you have to say it that way, Roanoke, Virginia, which I just love the Blue Ridge Mountains. Sarah Hope, my eldest, was born in Charlotte. Andrew, my youngest, was born in Roanoke. Went to Annapolis, Maryland as the first installed pastor in a new church development, Christ Our Anchor. Nothing nautical about that. Christ Our Anchor Presbyterian Church, had 10 years in Annapolis and loved that there. Unfortunately, first marriage went south a long time ago. Divorced in the mid-90s while I was in Annapolis, and met Linda through some of my national church work, and we married in late 1997. She moved to Annapolis because she knew I wasn't going anywhere because I had kids. And of course, then the next thing I know, Westminster comes calling, which was fine with her because Philadelphia is where she was raised. We moved here in 2000. We live in Copson Township and Red Ridge Farms. It's good. There you go. Is that good?
your father was a minister in.
No,
Cincinnati?
Dad was not a minister.
He wasn't?
No. He was not an ordained minister. He was clearly a minister of the gospel. He loved the Lord and was a mechanical engineer, went to the University of Rochester on the GI Bill, got his MBA at Wharton, and took a job with, as we like to say in Cincinnati, Procter and God. And was in charge of, worked in the cake mix plant and actually developed the refrigeration line for Crisco oil. While he was there, spent all his entire career, almost 40 years there. And he died in 2019, but a very faithful elder. He was the guy that the presbytery as well as the church always put on the personnel committee and always asked to go have the hard conversations with usually a pastor.
Did he do a sermon here once?
No, he did not preach here, but he's I like to say he's the only person who's been in more of my sermons than my dad is Jesus. So he's in good company. Other questions? Yeah, Dave.
I had a conversation with somebody and I said, what a great writer and speaker you were, that Don Lincoln was. And they said, well, he's no Abraham Lincoln. But,
I'm longer than him.
I said, well, compare him to our president, past presidents, he's pretty good. But seriously, for 20 years, I've observed you, your speaking style, your command of the stage, your wry humor, your self-deprecating humor, and the way you weave stories in and out of your talks. And I've used that in my own modest attempts to become a better speaker, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. That's rich. My colleagues say, Don, the art of the pause is yours. And they just, when we count words to try to make sure our timing is right, they all know, they may do 120 words a minute. Don's 90. And Bob Bell, Bob Young, both. understand the value of a pause. Yeah, Jeff. Thanks, Dave.
I want to thank you today
Hmm.
because you're so positive. I'm a positive person. And when you greet new people the way they should be greeted, that's so worth it.
Yeah.
And I thank you for those comments.
Being positive in a place like this, it's not hard. Sure.
Yes, my comment is based on our 3-year partnership when I was chairman of the trustees.
Yeah.
One of your many talents that I don't think a lot of people know is you have a firm grasp of church finances, which in 2 previous roles, the pastors didn't. Okay. And you also really understand the importance of good church governance and, sticking to decision-making processes and everything, which also was a part of my previous experience, but I thoroughly enjoyed our partnership there. So
Thanks, sir. Likewise. It's an organization, it's a business, it's a whole host of things. It's a church. It serves the gospel, but I've always said, we should be the best stewards of property and finances of any organization in the country. We have a mission, and it's a godly one. And when churches think, oh, we don't have to follow those rules with our property, or we can get away with those. It's, I've seen it. People say, oh, ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of approach to, oh, let's just throw some gravel down for a parking lot and the county will, we should be examples of doing things well and right. So yeah, Mark.
How important was getting a music degree before your ministry?
I think it was helpful to have a music degree. I was so involved in music prior to that I played in bands for 10 years. I was in choirs. I piano lessons as a kid. So I had a robust music background, but the music degree was superbly helpful, particularly when we got into the season of what we affectionately called, I may talk about this in a couple of weeks when Bob and Glenn there last Sunday, when we got into a season known as Worship Wars, which was about kinds and styles of music in worship. And people realized with me, they couldn't automatically say, well, that's bad music. And assume that they knew more than me about bad music or good music. But yeah, it's been helpful, clearly helpful. And as Craig said, got one of the most glorious music ministries of any mainline congregation in the area. And that's been a blessing. And I'll say the same thing about welcoming a new music director. Be an encouragement, positive. They're stepping into some big shoes, and the committee is talking to some superb candidates. Whoever it is will be different, and that's okay. In fact, that's probably good. Other question, Jim?
In the spirit of stories and storytelling, can you share with us maybe your favorite movie and or your favorite piece of fiction?
Holy cow. Wow. One of my favorite movies, it's a tough movie, but Schindler's List. Just a powerful expose of glimpses of how horrible we can be to one another as human beings, and how the Spirit of God can touch somebody's heart and drive them to do the right that is so terribly dangerous to do. Just a powerful movie. Oh gosh, fiction. Whew. One of the things I did in college and in seminary was I gave myself the gift of reading. Okay, Don, study Paul Tillich, theologian of the 20th century, who it was just, was not in my vocabulary. I mean, really difficult, thick reading. I would say, okay, Don, read Tillich for an hour, which meant like 3 pages. And then you can read X for 3 hours, and I read the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogy and Chronicles of Narnia multiple times through college and seminary as my sort of escape. I now read, thrillers and whodunits and, those kinds of things, and they all, kind of run together. So couldn't even tell you a favorite, but those 2 series, Jim, and it's one of the things I want to do in retirement. I still have them. I'm going to pull them out and read through those again. They were just amazing adventures with really powerful messages. Screwtape Letters, if you want to talk something that's kind of in a completely different genre, was the book my father gave me when I left for college, which is, if you don't know it, it's C.S. Lewis. And it's letters from a senior devil to a junior devil about how to manage his, his client, if you will, or his patient. And it's really revealing, and it was just great fun. So, yeah, Dean.
I want to add also how grateful I am, and I'm sure everyone, to have your leadership, pastorship, and a great CEO for this organization. And you mentioned a while ago that you hope to do some mentoring, and I'm glad to hear that. I was wondering if you might also want to do some writing.
I don't know. I started years ago, actually, a book, essentially to my dad. And it's about 100 pages. And I gave it to him on his 70th birthday. He had a heart condition that, I realized, I'm telling, and this is long before, recordings and streaming. So, Dad didn't live anywhere near me. So, he wasn't hearing stories about the lessons he taught me, the things I learned about God and about myself and about life from him. And I've thought, just for my own edification, I might write that, whether I would ever do anything with it. A couple of folks have talked to me about publishing sermons, and who knows? Well, I don't really have a ken for that, mostly because I write to speak. Some of my colleagues, I try to help along who tend to write to be read, and so you got a lot of words in there that aren't necessary. I mean, it's just, but I don't know, Dan, honestly, if I'll write. Have to see. Right now, I'm kind of looking forward to taking a break from it. I've loved preaching. And loved, but it does get a little more challenging, particularly after 22 years. Like, I've said everything I need to say to these people. And I think I've said to you before, Christmas and Easter, like Christmas, like everybody knows the story. He is born, but you got to be inspiring and, new and thought, and that's kind of an internal pressure. But I feel like God is still showing up. Thanks be to God, and I'm also ready to put that down. And I already have a preaching gig, down at the shore for a couple Sundays, and I'm sure I'll do some fill in. Put myself on a list for pastors who find themselves in a particularly if it's something happens in a household that we need somebody and need somebody quick. Sure, I can do that. I'd be glad to do some fill-in preaching, vacationing pastors who don't have the advantage of associates. It's one of the great joys of, being a head of staff in a place like this. You just got all these colleagues to share things with, which has been a blessing. Yeah, Connie.
I would would just like to say that your Easter sermon this year was amazing, because you talked about, well, Jesus is risen, but you also talked about the time after Easter until Pentecost, and so many churches, they do absolutely nothing. They don't even necessarily celebrate Pentecost.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have a church without Pentecost. And so the combination of you playing taps and then having Reveille play, I will never forget that.
Yeah.
It was great.
No, it's fun. Gene remembers, because like I think it was the Sunday he joined was actually a Sunday, which is I don't know, like 20 years ago. I actually did play my bugle just a little bit, and I think it was a Memorial Day. And I thought, well, how many people are going to remember I did this before? But I didn't do the Reveille thing. The Scouts invited me to come meet with them 2 weeks ago, because I was part of what the group that helped charter the Scout troop here, and they wanted to say thank you. And so I took my bugle and I said, play this, and it was my dad's. I had my merit badge sash, my Order of the Arrows stuff. I was like, I was a Scout too, and and it was, and then so I moved over to the side, and the Scoutmaster Mark Ponser goes, Pastor Don, could you bugle us out with taps? I only played the opening phrase on Easter. I was like, are you kidding? I'm like, oh man, I haven't done that at my lip. But I got through it. And it was another one of these little holy moments. And it was an encouragement and a celebration. This congregation is full of those, and look forward to, from afar, seeing and hearing what you're doing. Yeah, Walt, and her.
Oh, God, I'd like to publicly thank you for all your support that you've given me over the last maybe 5-6 years, I guess it's been, that I started live streaming the worship service into the chapel at Barrows Grove, where I guess we're approaching about 8,000 residents over there now. But it was a real gift of support by you to start out in theater, to bring in the live support and let the members of the residents over there have a worship service on Sunday morning if they couldn't get out to church. And so I've had some excellent support from your team here and from some of my colleagues at Marist Grove, who have stepped in and helped me out to live stream that every Sunday and to get nice comments back. And I know every once in a while from a resident saying, I really appreciate you bringing the service into there. And of course, you know about Carol and all your support with her.
Thanks, Walt. Thanks for your leadership there. This group is hugely responsible, because it was at a luncheon with this group at Bradley Run where I had the opportunity to have a conversation across a lunch table about something I was convicted about and couldn't seem to get the leadership off the dime on, because they just could not imagine, why would we want to do that? And there were a couple guys in this group who the light bulb went on and said, wow, that, and knew from personal experience how that could have made a difference in their own household in a particular season, and sought, to support in significant ways our ability to do what we do. And it's, and you guys know, for a period of time, it was, my father worshiped with us every Sunday, and I'd get a text from him on his flip phone, about the sermon. And what a blessing that was. And obviously, as was mentioned, nobody imagined a pandemic, and 95% of my colleagues across the country, big churches and little churches, were scrambling to figure out what to do with Sunday morning. Preaching to their phone in their den and recording that, sending that. And we had 3 years of recording. So that first Easter, if you remember, we had a video of a full sanctuary and the choir singing, because we had it. we had recording vault, and it was a huge blessing. And this, I mean, you guys, and some in particular, but an invitation to that lunch and a conversation across the table. So, I mean, the influence you have had, I mean, thousands of people being able to worship in a pandemic every Sunday. And, we were over 3,000 IP addresses in the first couple months each week. 3,000. So, yeah.
When you're filling in preaching, what's your favorite go-to sermon?
I'm going through all my files here and picking but I did one recently. I say back in the fall, I was going to revisit some things, and I haven't really revisited as many as I thought I would. One is a Mary and Martha story, where certain assumptions about what's really meant there, and I love that text. The prodigal, is preached so often, but there's some fun angles to it. There's the 99 sheep, the 99 and the one, and I did preach that one, is probably the text that speaks to me more than anything else. Well, it's got to be in the top 3. And the revelation for me is, our way of thinking about things, is to cut your losses. The one gets lost. Hey, you still got 99. Don't leave them in the wilderness and go after the one. And we all get that until we happen to be the one. And it's like, you mount the biggest search and rescue operation you can do. But the for me, the mind-blowing thing is there really aren't any 99 righteous. I mean, it says the 99 righteous. There aren't any 99 righteous. We're all, each and every one of us, one lost sheep. And God's going to chase us, until God brings us home. And that was the revelation of that for me. What Jesus was, I wish we had his tone of voice, because there's so many times I think, man, he was messing with folks. He had a wink or a little sarcasm. Well, the 99 righteous sheep said to one another, and we all go like, well, of course, there is no such thing. Anyway, that's a great question. And I know our time's probably, yeah, Dan.
Do you feel there's any unfinished business that you'd like this congregation to keep working on?
Yeah, I actually sent a letter to, and I'm going to preach about it this Sunday. I sent a letter to some households who have let the church know that the church is in their estate plans, in their will, or something like that. And it's a group of, I don't know, maybe 60 some people. And we're just trying to make sure we have better documentation of how it is. Is this a beneficiary designation? Is this a remainder of an estate? Is it after one dies or after you and a spouse die, if you're married or whatever? It's just so we have a record. It's not illegal, but it's clear to me that kind of planned giving is, some churches have been, had a really robust planned giving. I mean, some churches, I have friends who have, like an advancement office on the church staff, who's doing this kind of stuff. And again, I think particularly in congregations where you have really, 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 really deep pockets and big foundations in the congregation, that work's really important. It's also important when stewardship is sort of widely spread across the life of the church. And it's another leg of the stool that will provide this congregation strength. And we recognize your generation, and this is a generalization, but it's, my experience is it's accurate, is much more philanthropic much less concerned about, I need to designate my gift to X, Y, and Z because I want to see, I mean, much more willing to write a check to the church or the college and say to the president, use it however the university needs it, as opposed to, well, I want there to be a bench, and I love things like that as well. But so that's one piece, Dave, that I'm hoping to say a little bit more about what kind of a legacy, and part of this, and talk Sunday about the legacy that my parents did from their own estate, which was just, I could not imagine, here was one more holy privilege that my mom and dad gave me after their death to do good in the world, good for a college and good for a church. I was like, man, I can't believe I get to call an advancement office of a college and say, what's it take to establish a scholarship? I mean, there was a guy in my office 2 days later. So that's the only thing I really feel I'd like to push that ball forward a little bit. Thanks, that's a good question. This group has been an amazing blessing to this congregation. I remember sending Wes Smith over here every Tuesday. What a gift he was, and what a great teacher. Bob, what it was, another one of your, paying attention to what the Spirit was doing and bringing Wes on board. And this group really built its foundations, under his, and there's a guy who had stories. If you never heard Wes Smith had more stories, holy cow. He was a chaplain with the police. He was, the stuff he would tell. I'm not sure how much Bible study you guys did. Rick may know, but what a blessing Wes was in the life of this group. Thanks, guys.